It's 2012. You're searching YouTube. You type in musky fishing. Very few things are going to come up. It's early days of musky fishing and videos. One thing that'll probably pop up is a channel called Giant's Quest or Giant Quest. And two guys from Kenora, they were learning as they were going. It was early days of filming, but what drew a lot of people to Giant Quest was the way they filmed. It was third person perspective. It was like having a camera guy in the boat with no camera guy. And that's what drew me to watch your stuff. And anybody since then who's ever put a GoPro on their head, on their chest, on a post, owes my guest a big round of applause and his buddy Mike Grant, one of my friends, because they are some of the very early innovators really in the YouTube space. With me tonight, I have somebody that I will call a friend now. We've got to talk a lot off air through chat. I have none other than Heinrich Bier, sorry.
Yeah.
There you go. I've heard it said so many different ways. But I have Heinrich Bier with me. He's not only a muskie angler, helped basically start the filming craze along with Mike. You guys invented the Easy Cam post, which we're going to talk about tonight, which I think was a product that was way ahead of its time. Unfortunately, I think it was a little bit ahead of its time. And I just think that we owe you guys a lot of gratitude for what you guys did in that short span, musky fishing. And it really helped that these guys were some major sticks on Lake of the Woods. So, Heinrich, welcome to 54 Minutes with Heinrich Bier.
Hey, thanks, Glenn. I really appreciate you having me on here. It's an honor to be on your show, especially with the A list of guests you've had on lately. A bunch of guys that Mike and I definitely looked up to, just like you, all those years ago. I mean, I still watch basically everything all of those guys put out all the time. I'm still hooked. So even though I don't really get to fish anymore, I mean, my brain never shuts off from fishing, right? Especially muskies.
Well, I think we're all in that same boat, so to speak. And the last little bit here, having some of the guests that I have had on and people that have watched all my stuff, they know it's been a who's who of the early muskie history. Certainly with the Muskie Hunter crew, that's bucket list stuff for me,
Oh, for sure.
for a lot of my viewers. But the history side of it really appeals to me because I think that there's a lost aspect in modern muskie fishing about how things started, and not in the 70s or the 80s, but how modern musky fishing kind of got to where it is. And I've broke it down as pre-COVID and kind of post-COVID because there's this explosion of people strapping on GoPros and starting to film, like this guy right here, Mr. Brian Scaife. How you doing, buddy? I would put him up there as another one of those innovators really in our sport when it comes to filming. And I'm pretty sure I could speak for Brian that he would say he would look to you and Mike with what you guys did with Giant Quest. What was around on YouTube in 2010, 2011? I think you and Mike started fishing in 2009. What was the landscape of video and or there was no social media, let's face it, like it was just such a simpler time, but what was there at that time, Heinrich?
Honestly, I can't really say I remember there being a whole lot. Like, I was an early adopter of YouTube just as a person that watched it. Social media in general. I mean, I was an early adopter of Facebook too. Like, when Facebook started, you had to be in a post-secondary institution to even get on it, right? You had to put in which school you were going to, your student ID, the whole thing. And YouTube, basically, the inception of YouTube was that it was YouTube, right? It was a platform for people who had no other platform to get online and get yourself out there, right? It's an alternative to TV. Like all these guys that we're talking about, the A-listers, they were all on TV, and it's like, well, how do you get on TV? Like, how do you get yourself out there? And YouTube came along, and it just seemed like a natural thing to just gravitate towards that and try it out. I really honestly can't remember there being a whole lot out there. The only thing I can really say is maybe it was uncut angling. I'm not sure exactly when Aaron and Jay started, but I mean, I was a fan of theirs right from day one too. Um, yeah, I can't, I honestly don't remember. Like Mike and I would just spend our evenings or rainy days, like in the winter time, whatever, we'd be watching all the DVDs of all the greats, right? Bucher and Mesa Comer, in the in fishermen guys like Spence and the Linders and all that kind of stuff, and then just pouring through the magazines. Like it wasn't like there was a lot of content on there. I want to say when we first got going to, one guy I can remember who I don't really know what happened to him though was Pro Fisherman Jones. I don't know if you remember him, but he was definitely an early adopter too and going at it hard in the beginning when we were.
I think there's something interesting in what you're saying about there wasn't much around other than the professionals that were filming with a film crew that had budget. And for the private guys, like you say, there just wasn't much. You'd get a DVD, and I remember a couple of the DVDs coming out. I remember one with Greg Thomas fishing tubes on the river somewhere, which I watched 100 times. And when I fished with Mike, and he's trying to get me into Red October tubes, I was just like, I just didn't see it until fast forward to a few years ago, and now I'm as big of an adopter of tubes as anybody. But those early DVDs and VHS, that was the YouTube of the day. And I think you guys blazed a trail with what you guys were doing. And I just went back through the catalog. I watched a lot of the videos, and by today's standards, yeah, they're pretty rudimentary. But what I like about it, and I'm going to share a clip here, Heinrich, because I think it'll help some of our viewers that have never seen your stuff see what it was you guys were doing. And now, keep in mind, people, this is one camera in a boat, and you're going to hear the guys say, did you get the camera position right? I just think there's so much going on in this clip. And this is one of the early videos that I watched that I was like, hey, these guys are freaking legit.
Got it. Got the camera, buddy? Yeah. You want the net yet? Nice soft plastics fish.
Everybody's going to know that spot on Lake of the
I have
Woods.
to come back for it, eh? Aggressive fish.
Do
you think it's the upper 40s? No, it's the lower 40s. I'll probably just release it in the water. Did you see it? Stay on that camera. Here we are. Nice barred fish. That's the one I saw come up and hit this. I don't think that's the one we saw following the first.
It's not showing up too good on my... Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Did it play through for you there, Glenn?
It did. It's probably just our internet connection's a little bit wonky. But the thing I like about that clip, and hopefully everybody gets to see that at home, is that you hook up to the fish, Mike runs back, he adjusts the camera, and you say, do you got the camera? He's like, yeah, I got the camera. Do you need the net? And already at that really early days of filming, you guys were, let's make sure we capture the footage. And I think that was key, because fast forward a few years and guys are strapping GoPros on their heads or on their chest, which I'm just going to go on record. I don't like that view. And I've been open and honest about it. I don't like the shaky head cam. I don't like the chest cam. Brian Scaife will come on and tell us he likes a chest cam, especially for the audio and those quick couple shots you'll get. So I'm with him on that. But what I liked is that you guys were going for that third person perspective. What was the thought process behind that, Heinrich, on not wanting to just go with the easy head mount or chest mount?
Well, I just like you, I really don't like the shaky, the bouncing all over. I mean, if you want to do that, go watch Blair Witch, right? but honestly, another part of it is that you get a better perspective of seeing spots. Like you especially I chose a camera on purpose that wasn't a GoPro, that had a really wide angle to it, and you could you could see a lot more of the spot we were fishing, right? Especially because I like to do time lapse editing and stuff too. So you could really kind of see how we're positioning the boat and working the boat. And the other huge factor is watching yourself. I mean, even if you don't want to put your footage on YouTube, it's just like a professional golfer or a batter for baseball or tennis player. Those guys are filmed and then they watch the footage over and over again to kind of understand where their mistakes are, or you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
For me, it was really important too, because when I first started fishing Lake of the Woods and met Mike, like I knew nothing about muskie. I was completely green. I grew up fishing for everything but muskie, and it was a huge learning curve, especially to catch up to Mike. And his figure eight game was really strong, and watching myself over and over again figure eighting, I could really see where I was falling short, and I think it really sped up the learning curve for me to be able to watch myself on camera.
I would totally agree with that. And I would say that being able to see your body positioning, how you're moving the rod, a lot of people will say, well, the head cam, you can see what you're doing in the figure eight. You can see if you hang that out, outside turn and pull back into the face of the muskie. But having that third person perspective, you can see your body movements. You can see where you're placing your feet. You can see where your shoulders are. And I would totally agree with that. When I was learning the muskie game, especially with Kyla's brothers, and I fished with her older brother Jeff a lot. And I remember up on Long Legged, I had like a 45 to a 48 up to the boat. It come in from the back. I did that big outside first turn, and I basically just pulled the lure away from it. Instead of hanging it, I tried to pull it away. And Jeff just looked at me and he's like, "Are you going to F around with this fish all night, or are you going to catch it?" And it didn't click with me. But then I watched him a few more times, and I think like a day later, he got a 48 on an open water reef where he just did like textbook everything right. And I was like, damn it, I want to do that. So watching these guys, and we've talked about it a lot on this channel, when you fish with better anglers, a guy like Mike, I've fished with him a few times and watched him, you pick up those things. And when you film yourself, you're right, you can go back. It's like, game tape or whatever, and you get a sense of what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And I think it was a bold choice for you guys to do that, because I think it would have been easy to just stick on, the head mount or the chest cam. And that's what we did when we started filming. We just put on the chest cam. We got some sucker rig footage with it. But when did you guys know that you needed to make a change from just having a tripod to trying to develop what would become the Easy Cam Post? And for all intents and purposes, was the prototype of stuff like the YOLO Tech Post, of Brian Scaife's homemade pole that he put in his boat. All of us do something similar. I'll show the viewers what I did with the Easy Cam Post. But where did you guys, and how did you guys decide that we had to do something better than just a tripod in the boat?
Well, yeah, we started with the tripod, like you're saying, and it was constantly falling over. It took up room, right? You have to basically take it down and put it up every time you move spots. So I got like just a basic camera monopod, and I was like, well, where's the easiest place to attach this in the boat? And the easiest spot in my mind was just the seat post of the boat. Easy Cam Post works all different kinds of places, but the original inception was to go to the seat post. So I actually there was probably, I want to say 7 or 8 different styles of seat posts that are kind of, standard with most of the big boat manufacturers. And I bought one of each style and had them a bolt welded on top of them, and I had a threaded, basically telescopic pole that would screw onto, so it didn't matter which boat I got into, it would screw onto each style of boat seat post. So then when we actually wanted to take the idea and make it into a marketable product, we had to come up with another concept of like, okay, well, how do we take this and make it so it can adapt to basically any size of seat post or any kind of round thing like that. Like some guys are putting them on rod holders, or railings in the boat, all kinds of different stuff. But yeah, that's how it started.
So fast forward from there to trying to prototype some. Did you guys just kind of haphazardly prototype some stuff yourself, or what was the process there to get to where you had like a working prototype? And I see you have one behind you there. Maybe if you can grab that and
Sure.
show the viewers, because I know there's still people that probably don't know what an easy cam post is and looks like.
Yep. That's a seat post right there out of a boat. And so the original of this piece at the bottom was made on a 3D printer out of a brittle plastic, because that's what they print out of. And so this just slides over top, and these are basically like bindings off of a snowboard, ratchet straps off of a snowboard, right? So you slide it over depending what size post you have, and these just like ratchet right on here. And then they have a release built in them too.
Yeah. So
that's it. So yeah, we had this piece, the bottom piece, made out of a 3D printer, and then obviously this is just like a telescoping standard like camera monopod that's extendable. And this piece, the original piece, we shipped over to China and then had a mold made of it so that they can make it injection molded. And this is a much harder plastic. It's polycarbonate, right, which is a really durable, hard plastic.
It's interesting because when Mike gave me one of the Easy Cam posts, this is already going back quite a few years ago, we started using it exactly what you're doing. Stick it on the seat post in my little 16-foot tenor, stick it on the seat post in Dave's boat. And we've graduated past that. We have something that's a little more permanent, and I'll show it here in a minute. But I still use one when I go fishing with, buddies. I can just stick it on a seat post, and it's super quick and easy. And like Scaife says here, and I'll just show his comment again for people to see, Easy Cam Post 100% helps me fill them out of other people's boat. It completely changed how I was able to get content without having to be in my boat. That's so true, because now we can be totally portable. You can bring, at least the way I have it set up, I got 2 cameras on the top of the Easy Cam Post. I can get my style of footage with whoever I fish with. So I think that was a key part of it. And obviously guys are, modifying it as we go, but you guys brought it to market, I'm seeing, in 2015. How many years did you guys prototype that, Heinrich, before you thought you had what it is we see today?
I want to say it took us about 2.5 years, probably, from the original kind of concept to like actually having the product in our hand on market. And we debuted it, I want to say it was actually at the Toronto Sportsman Show in 2015. So, just a little bit earlier than right now in the year. And then we took it to the Spring Fishing Show and the Odyssey that year as well, the Musky Odyssey. So that was the idea, to have it, ready for that spring, right?
How was it received through those shows?
Actually, honestly, it was pretty awesome. It was a good response from the Canadian guys. Everybody had positive things to say and was willing to pitch in, do whatever they could to help promote it. All the big Canadian names definitely took an interest in it and came and said hi to us, and it was pretty awesome.
Like I had said in the intro, I think it was a product that was ahead of its time, because like I was saying, there's this breakdown of post-COVID and pre-COVID where you see this huge explosion of guys starting to fill them, even in the years leading up to COVID. That 2018, 2017, guys are starting to fill them. GoPros are becoming more readily available. They're easier to use, once the looping functions were available. And there was this, explosion of guys starting to do it. And ironically, in a probably a cruel twist of fate, is when you guys weren't really doing much with the Easy Cam post, and then something like the YOLO Tech post comes along, which a lot of people have. I have one. I think it's actually right behind my computer here. And we use that in a pinch too, but it's very flimsy, and modern cameras are actually pretty heavy. There's a lot that goes into them. And I've talked to Michael Grant about it too. And I was just like, if you guys could have just held on those couple more years, I think there was so much that you could have did with the Easy Cam post, which is, somewhat unfortunate, but it's great for guys like me, like Scaife, and a lot of the other guys that are using it, because I think it is so adaptable. When you guys, when was it that you guys kind of stopped marketing it, Heinrich?
Probably the very next year, honestly. It's kind of where we fell flat. We just had everything else together, and then we didn't really put any money or time into marketing and advertising. I mean, part of it was we were just tapped out, right? We were burnt out. Also, we had dumped an insane amount of money into getting the product off the ground, and it's like, okay, well, where do we go from here? And yeah, a few differences of opinion, and uh, there was like the strategy too at the time was not really for us to keep filming. Like the idea always was that other people would pick it up, and then, you know what I mean, they would be the ones filming and promoting it, is not so much us anymore, like kind of pass the torch type of a deal. And instead of advertising too, kind of leaned on using the product guides and magazines for one. Like there was a lot of people who were really nice and put it in their magazines. Gord Pizer got it in Outdoor Canada for us. Gussie got it in Cottage Magazine up there in Sunset Country. I mean, I don't want to leave anybody out. I got it into like Bass Fan, which was huge at the time for me. I couldn't believe it wasn't seeing it in Bass Fan, right? Outdoor Photographer, which is a huge photography magazine, that they put it in their product guide. Like there's actually quite a good list of people. In Fisherman put it in, Sarek put it in Musky Hunter Force in that product guide. So the support was there. I guess, like I say, really it was just up to us to kind of push it a little bit further, and we didn't. And maybe something like trying to hitch on to a big bass tournament series or something would have been a good call. Like Jared Swindle actually was an early adopter and was using it when it first came out too, to film himself. So there's we have Cooper Gallant using it right now too. He right from the get-go of his career, he had one in his hands too, and he's always been using them as well. So
I just, again, I have to go back to that thought of, it was just a year or two too early. The social media quite wasn't what it is. Even fast forward to 2018, 2019. Adam says he's seen it in Game and Fish magazine as well. And like I say, I know I've talked to Mike about it, and if you guys could have just kept pushing it to like that 2018, 2019 period, I think that's when things would have really kind of snowballed. But it is interesting to see now that there's a lot of the guys within this YouTube community that have reached out to you guys and are running one, and there's I see them on other posts on social media and stuff too. Guys are using them, so it is interesting that it's had this shelf life, probably past where you guys thought it was going to be. And I still think it's a super viable tool for anybody that wants to fill them. And I don't want to take the whole conversation just talking about that, because I want to talk about some other stuff with you, but I just want to show the viewers how I have mine set up. It's something I've never really talked about on our channel, how we have our boat set up for filming. And I know Scaife has talked about it in his channel. So it's something that we'll maybe do at some point, but I'm going to run a couple of quick clips here so the viewers can see, and I'll just kind of talk through, what it is we're seeing here. So I removed that bottom plastic piece. So I just have the pole, basically that monopod. And with that, I put it inside of a Canon tube rod holder. And That way, it allows me to slide it into my track system. So I can move it anywhere in my boat where I have tracks. And then at the top, I got this piece off of Amazon, and it allows me to swivel two cameras any position I want. So I always run one starboard, one port side, and it just gives me that flexibility to have a camera facing wherever it is I want it. And something that we learned early on filming is that we always fish port side. So you want to have your main cameras that way, but you always get that one strike that is out the other side, or the fish takes you around. So you need to have coverage. And actually, one of our viral videos that, it's got a couple million views is a big fish on cedar that he catches on the port side, and it goes under the trolling motor to the steering wheel console on my old bass boat, and we get it with that starboard camera. And if I didn't have that mount with two cameras there, I don't get that footage. So I think just the flexibility of it really works well for me. I can run that in any boat that has a track system. And I can also take that out, put that plastic base back on, put it on a seat post if I jump in with somebody else. So I just think there's so much you can do with it. Did you guys even think that guys were going to take it somewhere else, or that guys would do something different with it, Heinrich?
Oh, I definitely thought it was a possibility. Like, there is a video on our YouTube channel where I took it to the skate park in Kenora way back then, and strapped it on, rails that kids would grind on for skateboarding. I don't know how much you know about skateboarding, but those handrails are just like all the handrails you find all over any town or city, right? Like on stairs, and it straps perfectly onto those kind of things. And a local kid there that was working in the skate shop there at the time, and I put a little video together just to demonstrate how it could be used like that. Also, like the roll bars, the kind of the framework on a side by side, I've had a couple of guys strap it on there, and it works quite well on there as well, just for another idea. And your rod holder idea there, Kyle Garon from Slobland Flicks just put out a new video yesterday, and he's basically kind of doing what you're doing. He's got the stand up kind of adjustable rod holder in the track, and he's just attaching the, like, ratcheting the easy cam right onto the outside of the rod holder, as opposed to sticking the post inside of it like that. So I know he's used it way back in the past doing that too, and he's just got his hands on a new one because he wants to start doing that again. So yeah, I definitely thought there was different ideas,
For sure.
Yep.
While we're on the topic of it, and before we change subjects a little bit, I do want to say to the viewers that Heinrich sent me a case of these. I have 6 of them in my garage, and we're going to do something really cool with the viewers. Heinrich and I have talked about it. Heinrich's talked with Michael Grant about it. And I want to do a giveaway, and we're going to talk behind the scenes, but for sure, we're going to give away 2 of these EasyCam posts, and we're actually talking about possibly including an action cam. And we want to do something where we could give it to somebody who's just getting into filming, not somebody who's already, for lack of a better term, at my level or Brian Scaife's level, but somebody new that's trying to get into it, that wants to try, set up a tower, get a camera up there. We're not sure exactly what we're going to do, but I think that's a really good idea. And my initial thoughts, Heinrich, is I want to use my YouTube channel as a place where we can have some people send in, maybe a clip of, 30 seconds to a minute. Maybe they filmed it on their phone. Maybe they have a GoPro on a shaky head cam and they're trying. We'll look at some footage and they can tell us why they need an EasyCam post. And we'll do something like that where we can do a really cool giveaway, and we can sit down together online here and go live. And hopefully that will help that next generation of musky anglers, and preferably somebody younger that's getting into the sport, because there's such a high barrier of entry for musky fishing as it is. And then when you add on the costs of trying to fill them, and back to the education aspect Heinrich, for some of these younger, newer, inexperienced anglers to have the ability to film themselves, I think that's super valuable.
Yeah, exactly.
So I just want to say to everybody, look for that in the next, say, in the next month to month and a half. We're going to put something together that'll be really cool. Maybe even tie it into when our channel kind of gets to that 5,400 subscribers, because that'll be a cool little benchmark for us. So that's something that we want to maybe look at. Beyond that, when you guys were building the easy cam post, and this will be kind of my last thing here on it, Heinrich, what other products were on the market? Was there anything like that other than what you guys were looking at? Did you have any things that you could look at beyond just like a tripod?
Well, I mean, camera monopods have been around. That's essentially what that is, right? We just attached the thing onto the bottom so that it could grab onto other things, and we actually patented that concept. That's a utility patent. So you're not really patenting the design specifically. It's just the overall concept of strapping on a camera mount like that in that kind of fashion. But like, a monopod, basically you would be setting on the ground, right? You're going to have to hold it with one hand. It's just for a quick shoot instead of having to set up a whole tripod.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the only other thing that was around at the same time was, like you mentioned, the YOLO Tech was basically coming out at the same time, but like you said, it's really flimsy. It's really only meant for very small cameras like a GoPro. It can't really hold bigger things, which didn't work for us because we wanted to have like basically an SLR, like a digital SLR style camera on there, plus an accessory in between, like I always used a fluid video head, right? And that adds another 1.5 pounds to the whole mix on top of there too. So the more weight you put on top, the more leverage it gets to start bobbling around and makes your makes your footage that much more shaky again. So the whole idea was to try and make the thing as robust as possible at a reasonable price point.
Yeah. Something that we just talked about off air recently was this push to guys going to these massive towers. And Nick Eady from Musky Frenzy does it. I see Doug Wigner was using one last year where you get that super high, almost like a 360 cam looking straight down. And I know some guys are doing that to try and avoid the background. And again, back to what you guys were doing, fishing where you guys were fishing in that clip, like everybody on Lake of the Woods is going to know that spot. You're not hiding it. But back to the point of, you still have to catch the fish. You got to be there to catch it. But in today's world, there's such a stigma against the YouTube musky guys. There's this back and forth between some of the guys, like, don't come film on my lake because we don't want you to show the backgrounds. And times were certainly simpler when you guys were filming. And even when we started a few years ago, like, we didn't hide anything, and we don't really hide much today. We probably will, going forward, try to do something different where we're not showing the backgrounds quite as much, just because some spots are giveaways. But when you see this push to these ultra high towers, you start to get that shake of the boat, and everything magnifies, and there becomes a point of diminished returns, right, on some of your footage. What I liked about the easy cam post is I can still get it high in my boat, but it's not, other than my tinner gets pretty shaky, but like in my pro guide, it's solid all the time. And I think that was key to your guys' product, right?
Yep. And I mean, we could have made it taller, but again, you just add to the overall cost of it. And to be honest, now that I've been sitting here thinking about it, that was also a little bit of a stubborn kind of failure when we launched. Is our price point was too high. We were trying to recoup a lot of our production, like setup cost, with our first production run, which we honestly were advised against. You take some advice, and some of it you don't. We probably should have. Like, we're selling them now for like $50 a piece, and I think originally we were like up to like $150 a piece. So like, we've come down huge, right? So that was a big part of the problem too in the beginning, to be honest.
Well, again, it was a different time, and it wasn't Amazon where you could get everything right away. I'm right there. Like, I'm thinking, if that product is on something like Amazon or Etsy or one of these places where you can easily buy it. And I mean, even just some of these online stores, like I have a merch store on my YouTube channel, and we can add products on there. You can add that kind of stuff, and you don't have to go on, high prices. You go on the quantity of it. So there's so many different things in today's world, right? I just think that you guys were ahead of your time with it. But I want to talk about some of your guys' early fishing, because I think for a lot of people outside of the Messicomers, the Serics, the Pete Manas of the world, you guys showed some of the coolest footage of Lake of the Woods, some of the Eagle stuff. And I know, back in that time frame, with Uncut, with like Ryan Mallow and Aaron, that big fish off of Eagle, there was just some cool footage from that time period that we didn't get to see, because if it wasn't a professional video shoot, it just wasn't coming out. What was fishing like, in 2011, 2012 on some of those lakes? Because I think a lot of people would call that like the almost the heyday of some of, Lake of the Woods or Eagle, at least in modern times.
Well, honestly, Lake of the Woods was an easier lake to fish. Eagle was always a challenge. I mean, I especially always found it for myself. Eagle was a big challenge. I mean, we had our good days there too, but yeah, fishing was really good, and like that was another reason why we got into filming. Like we literally were playing bumper boats with Jim Sarek and Bucher and Petros, and we ran into Mesa Comer all the time. We'd even see the in-fisherman guys out, Bill Sandy, Pete Mana, all the big names. Especially on Lake of the Woods, you'd bump into them, right? And then if you're fishing Eagle, you're playing bumper boats with the Herbecks and like Scott Jagger, and there's a bunch of big name guys there too. Like, so, yep.
What, looking back at it, was it, and I know you don't do a lot of musky fishing now, just being where you live and stuff. Do you think it was easier, less pressure? Like, obviously there's so much pressure on a lake like Lake of the Woods right now. Eagle's got so much pressure, but what was it actually, just like seat of your pants, like fishing back then, compared to what you see on social media now? Because there was no social media. You didn't post a picture every single day, or even if you did, your feed wasn't inundated with, big fish after big fish. It just, to me, that's kind of when I started to get right into musky fishing, when I met my wife in 2008, and we started to get into it more. But you didn't see a lot of stuff posted. You were still waiting for Musky Hunter magazine to show up. You're waiting for Musky Hunter to show up, TV to show up, So it just felt like such a different time. Like, does it feel like that to you?
I think it's cyclical. Honestly, I think that you're going to have some stronger periods and some weaker periods. I've been fortunate enough to fish with guys like Pete Mana and Doug Johnson, and like when Doug Johnson first started, there wasn't a lot of 50-inch fish period on Lake of the Woods, because back then everybody was smacking every muskie over the head, and same with when Bucher came to Canada, guys were cleaning out Wabigoon and Eagle Lake and even Lac Seul, right? Like that's why a big reason why they put a zero keep thing on Lac Seul period. Like they wanted to preserve the fishery, but I mean, there was certainly a lot of pressure back in the 80s and the 90s too, which is well before my time. But I don't know. I think that it'll come around. I know everybody was saying last year was a tough year up there, but I mean, just like everything else in nature, I honestly think it's cyclical.
I would tend to agree. And I don't have a long enough history to really be able to see, those ebbs and flows. But Dave and I do have probably enough of a, you know, a body of work on, especially a lake like Cedar, where we really kind of cut our teeth. And we've seen Cedar go through those really good years where you're getting, we almost think we're going to get 3 fish every time out, to, all of a sudden there's a year where it's like, oh, it's going to be, it's going to be tough to get 1 fish. And then it picks back up, and it does ebb and flow. And I think, and a lot of people have talked about it, I think coming out of COVID, we're going to see some anglers drop away because it was a tough year last year. And guys are just like, yeah, this is harder than we thought. So it is going to ebb and flow. And I do think some people that are going to stay here are going to be the ones that take the sport, to a new level or whatever it is. But one thing I want to talk about, especially with those earlier days when you guys started to film, was there is a big push from the tourism boards, from the guys like Jim Sarek that were filming, and this is no knock on guys like Jim or Pete Mena or Mescomer, but it seemed like, and I think it is even to this day a little bit, these tourism boards get behind these bigger quote unquote TV stars to come up and film here. And we just don't see a lot of support for the local guys. And I'm not talking about myself, but there was local guys like you guys at the time that were filming and, trying to support the area. And I know guys like Jay Siemens now, he does get a lot of support locally, but you have to get to a certain point. Was that something that you guys seen early on too? It was like, it was these big name guys, and it's very hard for somebody like you guys who were trying something new, something unique, somebody local, to try and get some support to take it to another level.
Yeah, I honestly kind of always felt that way, and I did, go on. Back then everything was on Musky forums. I know, like, Musky's First was a big one, and talk about that kind of thing. But really, I guess what it boils down to is that, most of the customers that are coming to Northwest Ontario are from the States. So I guess it just makes sense to use people that are recognizable to Americans, right? Like, that, I think that's big part of the strategy. So, but
Yeah.
we did get business support though from Lake of the Woods Business Incentive Corporation, for not for filming for our YouTube, but for the Easy Cam, and also Northwestern Ontario Innovation Center out of Thunder Bay. So we did get some support, but you really did have to get after. I mean, it wasn't like we were knocking on their door, not the other way around, right?
Mm-hmm. I think that's probably true in today's world too. I haven't really looked for a lot of monetary support really, and I'm sure there's some out there if we really wanted to look at it. But with YouTube, it's such a different thing than when I had Sarek on, and he's telling me that every week he had 275,000 viewers, and it's this big platform, and it's national. And you look at a YouTube page, and even somebody like Doug Wagner, he's getting maybe 20,000 views on a video, or today's angler, or even somebody like Brian Scaife, if he's getting 5 to 10,000, it just doesn't compare. And it's hard to compare apples to oranges, because those guys, yeah, they had a lot of backing, and they had national television shows, where even somebody like me on my YouTube channel, we got a great community here. It's hard to break past our little niche. And just an outside story, and actually I haven't told you this, Heinrich, but I reached out to Dave Brown, who's our marketing guy with Akuma, who I'm sponsored by. And it's my only pen to paper sponsorship, just to be open and honest there. He's going to come on and do one of these, because I think that's an interesting company that is huge globally. But far as I know, I'm the only guy that does any kind of musky fishing on their roster. And I want to see what he says about musky fishing, because I think he's going to be like, it's a sliver of a sliver of a sliver of what Okuma looks at. So those are the kind of uphill battles that we're always dealing with. So it is tough, but I just think that taking what you guys laid, as those early videos, and you guys were doing some underwater footage, which is something that I always thought was cool, and again was way ahead of its time. You guys were doing some interesting stories in the boat, talking about what you were doing. I know you did a video talking about trolling. I just think that it wasn't just, even early on at Catch Fest, was there a thought process behind that, Heinrich?
Oh yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to bring the education aspect into it, right? You got to have something to offer other than Catch Fest. I mean, I'm not knocking that either. Like, one of my most favorite DVDs ever was Just Big Muskies. I mean, who doesn't love watching, you know, 50 to 55-inch muskie one after another get raked in? But that was also a different time, right? So definitely it was about promoting the area overall. Like you said, like, we wanted to bring people into the area. We were friends and still are friends with a lot of camp operators around there. Um, at the time, we were friends with the guy that had Rednecks Rebellion Clothing in Kenora. Um, yeah, we just wanted to promote local businesses, even the restaurants and bars around town, right? Like, it was just about promoting the whole area, and also that bring that the education aspect into it. And like, I mean, everybody calls it God's country for a reason. It's just so spectacular up there. We wanted to showcase that as well.
There, there is an interesting. I'm not even sure how to put this. There's an interesting group of guys that fish and guide on Lake of the Woods that, unless you're in the know, you wouldn't know about them. And somebody like yourself, Michael Grant, and Mike is going to hate me for saying this, but he's somewhat of a local legend in this area. Everybody
Yeah,
knows him.
he sure is.
He is, and rightfully so, because I put him very high on my list of anglers that I've personally fished with.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's fished so many different bodies of water in northwestern Ontario and done well on all of them, to me, that puts him ahead of somebody that's just a one lake specialist. Because I think some of the guides that spend their entire life on one lake, you get a bit of an advantage on that lake. But somebody like Mike, he goes to all these other lakes. But you look at a lake like Lake of the Woods, and Darcy Cox, people in the musky community know who he is, but outside of the musky community, a lot of people might not know that name, and yet he's like one of the big sticks out there. Somebody like Dave Bennett, who's not just you know a, a pure musky guy. He's another guy that's one of those guys that he's one of those big sticks there. Thatcher at Drop Time, yeah, he's a little bit newer to the musky scene, but there's these guys there that are not well known outside of the area, that don't do a ton of social media, that don't buy into that hype. Was that always something from Lake of the Woods, that the guys were a little bit more secretive, quiet? Like, I know Mike, he keeps his cards close to his chest.
Well, he does now, but
Yeah.
back then he was very active on Facebook. We all were, and so was Darcy Cox, so was Ryan Marlowe. I mean, I had a great season working with Darcy and Ryan's shop in Kenora. I mean, it was awesome memories. We had a ton of fun together. We kind of felt like we were local celebrities in there for sure. And people get fatigued. I think people get social media fatigue and like burned out from it. And and as you become a better and better guide, like somebody like Darcy, you don't really need to advertise anymore, right? All the big name guides, you could say that Johnny Dadson was the same way, like Kyle Garon, who from Slobland Flicks. There's a huge list of guys that, like, they just basically guide the same people the same weeks every year. The repeat clients, there's no reason to advertise or show anything off, right? And you become friends. I mean, it was the same thing for me too, right? I guided for 10 years on Lake of the Woods, and a lot of those people would come back, like I say, the same weeks every year. You don't need to show anything off to the rest of the world, because it's between you and those clients who basically become your friends that you talk to for years after, even when you're not guiding anymore. So, I mean, I could tell you stories about a bunch of those names you dropped too. Like, I bought my very first Calcutta reel from Thatcher's dad when he had a shop in Nestor Falls. Like, I go way back with Thatcher's family too. Like, Dave Bennett was always a big supporter of me and Mike, you know, and he's a big stick no matter where he goes, no matter what kind of fish he's after too, right? Like, he's got a huge list of tournament accomplishments. And like Northwestern Ontario was kind of interesting too for me, being a Southern Ontario guy. It's a whole different world up there and a whole different community. Like, all the bass guys, all of the guys that kind of, you know, focal point would be Gussie, but you got Matt Ryberg and all the other guys that fish with Mike Reed, Jess Swenson, Jamie Bruce, like, and I got to chum around with all those guys too every year at Bassin for Bucks when I lived in Sioux Narrows, especially because I worked for years for Matt Ryberg. And Bassin for Bucks was like everybody, all that big list of guys would come in and all hang out, and it's a pretty special thing. You know, they all support each other and they all kind of feed off of each other's energy. And yeah, it's just, Northwestern Ontario is definitely a special place in Canada for nurturing and growing talent in fishing.
Absolutely. And there's that dichotomy of Lake of the Woods on one side, and then you got your Eagle Lake guys. Like you said, you got Herbie, you got the Jager brothers, who, you know, I'd put them right up, you know, with any of the guys.
Exactly.
You got, you know, Cal Ritchie's made just one name for himself. And, you know, there's some of the other guides, and like one of our buddies, Johnny Bratlin, he guides out at Stanley's West Arm. He puts like giants in the boat. He's got zero social media presence. And if he was watching this, he'd be like, don't even mention my name. He doesn't want to be out there, because he's, like you're saying, like guys like Darcy Cox, people come back and fish with him every year because of him. So I just think it's really interesting. I do think that if you took Northwestern Ontario and you moved it to the middle of Wisconsin, I don't think guys like Darcy Cox or Thatcher or Dave Bennett would be as anonymous as they are. I just think they would be way more well known. And I just want to touch on Darcy. I don't know Darcy personally. I've never met him, but I love the stuff he posts, and he posts there very few things, but he's got these really cool tips and tricks on mods he does on baits and stuff from in his garage. And I just think it's guys like that that are really actually trying to do something really positive with the industry. And I think that's so good on a guy like Darcy, because it would be easy for him to just not do that, but he's sharing some of those tips and tricks. And I just think that part of it is so cool, that, you know, when he's going to post something, it is something cool. And I do know Dave Bennett a little bit. And just to touch on that, he's a guy, like you say, that wins tournaments everywhere. Seen him at the Nestor Falls Musky Cup a few times, and just
I'm wearing the shirt.
Yeah, I see that. He's just one of those guys. It seems like he's always smiling. It doesn't matter what he's doing. So you're right. There's just this great group of guys around here. I know you fished Eagle a little bit with Mike, and Eagle's been a tough one for us to crack, and we're getting better. Most of my bigger fish come from Eagle naturally. We fished it a lot, but it doesn't come easy on Eagle. So when you see the Eagle Lake guys, you know, putting up fish and putting up numbers, that's years and years of experience. And like you said, it's tough. What are some of your Eagle Lake experiences like?
Oh, you broke up just on me there, the last part of that question, Glenn, if you could say it again.
Just talking about Eagle Lake, what are some of your Eagle Lake experiences like? Because I know you said it's tough out there. What are some of the things that you remember of some of your trips?
Yeah, it's definitely tough. But we had some really good days there too, and saw some really big fish there. I did finally manage to crack over 50 there once. Trolling actually in the fall. We've got that video. I had that from 2 camera angles, so that was pretty cool on a hose bait. And, you know, I really like Sean Mayer of hose bait, so that was kind of a special one for me. But there was once like Mike and I would fish eagle. They're in the fall. Everybody else would be gone. A lot of those guys would switch over to deer hunting, and that was my favorite time on eagle. Honestly, was late in the fall because we had it to ourselves. Like we once had an 8-fish day trolling there. Actually, one of them was casting, so seven trolling and a bunch of big pike mixed in that too. And like I got a 49 and a 48.5 that day, and like every fish was a blimp. It was pretty crazy, but it is a tough. I think it's a much tougher lake to crack than Lake of the Woods, which is interesting because it doesn't get any pressure at night, right? Because it's off limits at night. But
which is an interesting argument. We're not going to go into it today. I know you and I kind of talked about it off air. That's a different discussion. But my buddy Dirk had asked, do you think some of the old timers constantly filming on Lake of the Woods made us more knowledgeable, or that it had a negative impact on the fishery, or is this a more recent thing? I just want to touch on that first, because I don't know going back if those, I'm just going to call them the TV pros, really had that big of an impact on the lake, because we seen Messacomer up on Long-Legged and Sarek on Cedar, and that's an isolated thing once a year. The change now is the constant flow of YouTubers or filmers, or just there's more and more people filming. But what's your take on some of that stuff, Heinrich?
I don't think it had a negative impact at all. I mean, again, that stuff it brings business to the tourist camps, right? That's the idea when they're staying at those places and promoting them. Plus, a lot of them ran, and I don't know if they still are, but they ran like muskie schools too, which educated a lot of people, and they all really pushed catch, photo, release. So I mean, that to me, it has more positive impact than anything.
Yeah, I would tend to agree that, especially early on, anytime there was quality promotion, it was good. And even to just bring that forward, Dave and I, we don't try to say a lot of names of lakes other than Eagle, because it's a name draw, on YouTube or whatever. But if we're going to a camp, we're going to try and promote it for our friends. And we're like you and Mike, where we're friends with just about every camp owner in the area. We have very good rapport with them. And you have to, if you're going to be in this sport or industry, you have to really try to be, easy to get along with. And before I change subjects, I just want to bring up Mike Grant again, and he's probably going to text me and crucify me, but he was somebody that early on, even though he's way younger than me, I looked up to him as a muskie angler. He's very humble. He's very down to earth. And I know early on, you're going to say he was a little bit different, and we all go through those ego phases, whatever it is. But when I started to get to know him with muskie fishing, he was past the industry drama, and he was somebody that I just liked his attitude about the fishing. So I tell a lot of people that that's who I want 54 Bus to kind of be like, the Michael Grant of today. But I want to change subjects, and I'm going to bring up something that Andrew Rideout, Frosted Tips.
Yeah, hey Rideout, hey buddy. Rideout and I cut our teeth together when we both showed up he was from North Bay and I was from further south Ontario, but we both cut our teeth at Totem, like so many guys do from other places when they get to Lake of the Woods. Totem kind of is the biggest of everybody, and they are, take in all the basically rookie guys who think they want to be a guide, and only few of us make it, right?
Yeah.
Rideout's still at it. He's one hell of a guide. I see Mikey commented in there too, someone who was is still very good. I stay in touch with him all the time. Darcy Finland. He's another one of those guys who people don't know who he is or don't talk about him. But I mean, you might have probably met him fishing at the Musky Cup, but Darcy is just an incredible fisherman for any type of fish, but he has a serious passion for muskies, and I love fishing with that guy.
So a quick story before I change subjects with Rideout. So I think it's year 1 or year 2 of Dave and I doing the Musky Cup, and I think we're boat number 5. I got my Bass Cat, does like 62, 64 tapped out. I think Cooper was boat 1 or 2, and Ride Out in Buwalda and his big Triton or whatever it is was like boat
Yeah.
7 or 8. We take off. I think we pass Cooper just before Cyclone. We come around Cyclone Point, and Dave are like, yeah, we got this. And then we just look to our side, and here's Ride Out's beard just flowing in the back. And they just blew our doors off, heading down past Cyclone towards Split Rock. And we didn't fish with them, I don't think, the year they won, but those guys did really good that year. And we watched them actually in Split Rock Narrows jigging some tubes. And you're right, guys that fished on Lake of the Woods and learned that lake, there's a certain something to fish in Lake of the Woods. Dave and I haven't figured it out. I know I talk with Thatcher a lot, and it's different than Eagle. And I've told a lot of people, it's especially that Sabaskong Bay area, it's the most unshielded shield lake in northwestern Ontario in my eyes, and the way it fishes. So those Lake of the Woods guys, they're definitely they're built a little bit different on the way they fish and the way that they learn those waters.
Oh, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned, you threw in Joe Cooper there too. I mean, talking of, he's definitely at the very top of the heap for guides on Lake of the Woods right now. He's been posting his fresh 50 Fridays, whatever, all winter.
Yeah.
It's like he doesn't miss a Friday. Like, how many 50s did the guy boat last year? It's insane.
So another quick Nestor Falls Musky Cup thing. He made a bet with Rideout that he was going to get a 50, and if he didn't, that Rideout could shave his mustache off. And I do believe Rideout shaved his mustache off with a trimmer. So yeah, lots of shenanigans at the Musky Cup for sure. We haven't been there for a few years. We're due to go back, so hopefully we'll get back there at some time. But I want to bring up something that I've kind of distanced myself in the past few months, and that's Dadson Blade Baits, because I know you and Johnny were super close. I have nothing bad to say about Johnny. I think what he's done in the industry speaks for itself. What he's done with Dadson Blade Baits speaks for itself. Nothing but good to say about him. Him and I just had a falling out. I'm just going to leave it there. But a lot of people probably don't know how much you had to do with the bone saw. What was the story behind that bone saw video?
Well, Johnny talked about it at another podcast not too long ago. I actually listened to it. What is that? The Ugly Pike podcast.
Yep.
But he had an idea for a topwater, and our mutual friend, who we haven't really brought up here at all, like who's someone that we should talk about, is Don Schwartz. Don Schwartz is friends with Pete Mena, Doug Johnson, Dick Pearson. I mean, Corey Schmidt is kind of his in with it in fishermen, to my knowledge. Maybe he'd correct me on that, but Don he's made a lot of different baits. There's an orange topwater right there that's called the Hoghead. That came out before the bone saw, and before that was the Rumbler. And it was kind of like they had made the perfect kind of prop tail bait. The prototypes were amazing. I guess he fished with Dick and Doug when they first made it. They were just slaying fish. And when they went to mass production, the production quality just wasn't there. And it was kind of like a heartbreaker for Don, and kind of soured him. And Johnny was kind of like, well, I want to have this, this redemption for a topwater for Don. And he kind of leaned on Don to make the concept of it's I'm not even sure what you call material. It's a unique material, and Don actually made trolling baits out of that material first. It's like, it's in a mold. It's a molded bait. I think Johnny came up with the name, and he really wanted to make a video to promote it. And I said, well, I'm not the guy to do it. I don't think my filming's at the level that you want. You need something way better. So my idea was to get Jay Siemens on board. So it was kind of like the perfect storm of having Don Schwartz and him and Jay really clicked. And well, we all, all of us did. So I don't think the shoot was only 3 or 4 days. And We fished mostly Lake of the Woods. There's some footage from some other unnamed waters on there that we'll keep a secret, but the big 50-inch fish was on Lake of the Woods, and it was like literally, I think, the first or the second cast into this little pocket that Don made, and Johnny and I came rolling around the corner in kind of the follow boat. We had 2 boats going, and there's just this pandemonium unfollowing, and Jay happened to have his expensive high-speed camera out, and it was just, one of those magic moments.
It's one of those things that sometimes you just capture lightning in a bottle, and full props to you guys. I mean, it's one of those videos that's definitely going to stand the test of time. That topwater footage is awesome. The catch is awesome. Jay, his production skills are amazing. The whole, whoever come up with the concept of the video, it's classic Johnny. I mean, that's Johnny's persona, to a T. It's one of those things that really worked, and there's been other people that have tried something similar, and I just think, was that some of your concept, or who come up with that?
Yeah,
concept?
we kind of bounced ideas back and forth off of each other. That was mostly him and I. Like, Jay was just there to film essentially, and same with like Don. He thought it was all goofy but funny at the same time. And he's like, "You guys just do your thing." And we wanted to do something that wasn't a typical fishing video. We wanted to just be fun and goofy, right? It was spliced in with some good fishing footage. So like, it was kind of like off the cuff, like improv, to be honest. Like, just kind of dreamt up these ideas, and we're like, well, what about this? And then, we go and film a few takes, like the little mini putt thing that I did, and flipping the pancakes. That was my idea. Shaving was my idea. And then, yeah, it was fun. We had a lot of fun doing it, to be honest.
I laugh every time I watch it, and I just watched it recently again. Again, it's one of those things that was a little bit ahead of its time, and full props to Johnny for making 100 and sticking with 100. And when Johnny and I were talking, like, I told him, I'm like, you're sitting on a gold mine. At the time, it was when he was doing those skullet blades with that skull print all over the blades. I'm like, you could sell thousands of these. He's like, yeah, I could. But then when everybody has one, they're worthless. And
Yeah.
I always admired him for his marketing skills, and he's built his little domain there, and full props to what he's done. I just, again, I think you guys were ahead of your time on what you did, and you're right. I think Jay Seaman's production took that to that next level. But I'm going to put you on the spot here. What was your thoughts on the bone saw as a topwater lure?
I've I've used it a ton. I've never actually caught a fish on one. We'll leave it at that.
We caught 2 small fish on it. My wife lost a low 40s. We never came close to getting a 50. And I'll just put this out there in the public domain. Johnny sold or give away the majority of them to his group of people, and he left 5 available for people within his community, and he passed them around. I actually had one here. I'm not sure if we had 2 separate ones or if it was just one. And if you could catch a 50 on it, you could claim it, which is a cool idea. I mean, again, Johnny thinks of that shit that other people don't. But it just, to me, it was a lackluster topwater. It really didn't do for me what I thought it was going to do. It's got the hype. I'll give it that. Like a lot of stuff, Johnny Dadson, it's designed for a purpose, and his purpose for it, he definitely did it. But talk about
it's a collector's item, really, to be honest, right? Like, it comes with they come with a really cool wooden box. That was a thing that Don liked to do, the cool little wooden boxes, and then each one came with a signed letter from Johnny, and they're numbered. And that's the coolness of it, right? Like, some guys are really into collecting baits, and it's like, there's only 100 of them, so that to me is what it's really all about. I mean,
For sure.
Like you don't want to throw a lure like that at rocks like you would like a top raider or something else that you can, you know, if you smash it, you're going to be able to replace it, right? Like,
No, for sure. Early on when you were working with Johnny, and I when I started watching some of your stuff or were following along, you and Mike were both throwing Dadson Blade Baits. And I know you and Johnny are not as close now, just from us talking personally, but what was your thoughts of, throwing Dadson Blade Baits? And Johnny did do a lot of innovative stuff. And somebody said the frosted tip blades, the first time I ever did what Johnny calls the Vegas, orange frosted and a green frosted, and I caught a fish on it right away. And actually, I think Mike actually might have give me that one Dadson of his, if I'm remembering correctly. But just stuff like that. Johnny was always doing something that other companies didn't do. What was your thoughts of, some of those early days of Dadson Blade Baits?
oh yeah, that was his thing. He wanted to build a better bucktail, right? He was into making sure every single blade was of high quality. He's using a heavier gauge of wire than like a Meps or a Cowgirl. And then, of course, every single one of his baits, he originally in the beginning, he was tying every single one. Like that guy tied thousands and thousands of baits. Like you probably can't see it. Somewhere hanging on the wall behind me is an eagle tail. You know, it's something Johnny talked to me about George Wall and the eagle tail, how he tied so many. And like Johnny always had a vision, though, right? He knew he was going to eventually burn out and want to pass the torch and have other people build his baits for him, but he had to build his brand first. And I think it was good marketing, the whole pirate thing, right? The skull and crossbones. And when he was guiding in his early days, he flew the Jolly Roger on his boat, and I want to say he even called his boat the Black Pearl, like something to that effect, right? The whole persona. And he had a musky forum back then that was exclusive. It was kind of a secret thing. You had to pay a membership every year. I was really active on it. I think I started, I want to say 2010 right away, right after my first season of being on Lake of the Woods. I found out about it through, again, Don Schwartz, actually. He had met Johnny at a show somewhere, and they were talking, and I think Johnny probably gave him a few boot tails. The first one that I ever saw was a single fluted 8 marabou tail. It was in Don's box, and Don's like, "Oh, you like that, eh? Well, you might be interested in knowing who that guy is. He's a fellow Canadian, and this is, look him up." And that's how I actually met Johnny. So, yeah. And originally I only threw in marabou too. Like Johnny at first was only marabou. It took him quite a while before he actually caved into going to the flashabou. Like, and then, of course, he was always innovating, right? Let's mix up the blades. Let's mix up the frosted tips. And I mean, now, like literally has every single design he's ever had documented in a book. It's pretty incredible to see that he could go and recreate any model he's ever made. And one thing, he was a huge supporter of me early on, and it was like a religion to me. I wouldn't throw anything but his baits, but he gave me a lot of baits, and I had, got to do a lot of trial and error and see which ones were going to make it. I mean, I wasn't Mike Hulbert. Mike was like, the pro staff of all pro staff. Like Mike Hulbert's in a league of his own. So, but yeah, Johnny was really supportive that way. Mike still liked to mix it up. He threw a lot of Dadsons, but he was also, super huge fan of Cowgirls. We threw a lot of other brands too, like, or I should say Mike did. Over time I started to give in, because it's like, okay, you got to mix it up. But early days I was super religious on throwing nothing but Dadsons.
There's a couple things I want to touch on there, and a little known fact that I don't know a lot of people will know is that Mr. Brian Scaife tied a majority of skirts for Johnny, flash skirts that is, for years. So a lot of those early skirts were tied by Brian, and I know that from Brian and Johnny. But one of the other things you mentioned, that single fluted 8 marabou, Kyla got one. I don't even know where. I don't know if if it came from Bobby's Sports Shop. I don't even know where it came from. I think it was a swinging single. She loved that bait, caught a ton of fish, lost it, I believe, on Eagle Lake behind her sister's cabin in like 6 feet of weeds. But we went on a chase trying to find another bait that did that thing. And to your point, Johnny documents everything. He knows exactly how many baits of a certain style have been put out in the open market, like within his group. We're not talking the production baits that like Mike Holbert sells here, because let's face it, those are not Johnny Dadson baits. But the ones that Johnny builds or Sam builds, he knows exactly what they are. So he goes way beyond what the average guy would do. And he was very supportive of us too. So like what we did with a blade with no name speaks for itself. I'm just going to leave it at that. But I do think that that is part of your history. It was part of Mike's history. I know you guys have kind of moved on from that. Mike has as well. I just think that there's some history that through a lot of guys that goes through Dadson Blade Baits at some form or another. But I want to take the conversation to a little bit to today. And I don't exactly remember how you and I connected, Heinrich. I know you commented on a few of our videos, and I was like, holy shit, it's like the OG of video stuff. Because for the viewers, Heinrich and I have never met face to face. We've chatted a lot online. I'm pretty good friends with Michael Grant, and he's talked about you a lot. And we just, all of a sudden, we started chatting. And I think we share a lot of the similar values. I'll put it at that. But what's your thoughts on the state of filming more than just the industry? I want to just like, what do you see in filming from where you guys started it to where things are today? Like obviously somebody like Jay Siemens is at the, he's like the Christopher Nolan of outdoor video, especially in like in our field. But what's your thoughts on what you see today when you click on YouTube?
Well, I mean, it's exploded. You can't even keep up with how many channels there are now. It's crazy how many channels there are. It's like, and there's been some good ones that have come and gone too, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's open for anybody and everybody, which is kind of where I thought it would end up going, to be honest. Like I say, like it's the whole concept of YouTube is that anybody could get on there and promote themselves, right? So there's so many good channels. Like I said, I can't even keep up. Like, and it drives my wife crazy. How much fishing I watch. I'm like, well, if I'm not doing it, I'm watching it.
There's all kinds of guys are chiming in like this. And I do want to.
Oh yeah, I love seeing all those guys chiming in that I haven't talked to in years, like Matt Sassoni there, and Andrew Clausen. I see Thatcher, Tom Dietz even chimed in there. I mean, there's a heavy hitter in the industry, right? Like Tom Dietz is somebody who we definitely looked up to back then.
I just want to say, I'm not taking any credit here, but when I asked Heinrich if he wanted to come on, he's been pretty quiet, private on social media. He has his own reasons, and when I asked him, he was like, I don't know if I want to go on after Bucher, after Sarek, after Hiding, after Jeremy Smith. I'm like, you're right there. And to be honest, like for the record, I asked Michael Grant. Michael is very, very much a lot more private right now. He doesn't want to get caught up in the industry, and I respect that. Totally respect it. And I would have respected it from you too if you said no. But I know a lot of these guys are like, you're having Heinrich on. It's a bit of a win for me because, like I said in the intro, I love the history and I love talking some of this stuff. But like you mentioned, a guy like Matt Ciccone, he was guiding out of Temple Bay, and I got to know him through Bobby's Sports Shop. And he's another one I fished with on Eagle. One of those heavy hitters that nobody talks about. Nobody would know his name outside of a tight knit circle, and it's just such a cool industry when you see that kind of stuff. And it is almost better that sometimes it's it's not this mass appeal to everybody. And it's like we almost have to cherish that the industry is, is small and tight knit, because you look at some of the mega stars in our industry, and they're starting to transcend musky fishing, but with that comes this whole host of its own problems. So I agree that there's so many cool channels right now. I can't keep up on all of them. You mentioned the Slobland guys, and they just dropped that video with like a 55 and a 57. It's just like that's the stuff it dreams for most musky anglers. And that video is so well done. Like, it's very good. And I do like the high production value of, a number of videos. I also like, the quick hit kind of greasy videos, for a lack of a better term. I think there's room for all of it in here. What I think people are, oh yeah, here's another one. Rideout says,
Oh, well, yeah, that name's familiar to
yeah,
me too.
us too, especially in the Dadson group.
Yeah.
He's one of those quiet killers, so to speak. But I do think there's that big push away from the catch fest videos. Guys want to get a little bit more informational, educational. One thing I did want to mention, and I know it's something that I think we click on, is we've tried with our channel to be obviously more educational, but include a little bit more of our family. And I take some slack for that at times. And I'm actually working on a video right now that's going to be family orientated and talk about it. But that's something that you and I have kind of, talked off air about, that I think there is a bit of a shift where, even somebody like Doug Wagner and Jesse fishing on Pipestone Opener last year, I think that's one of Doug's, probably one of his best videos, where just him and Jesse having fun. Yeah, some of the swears and stuff are maybe a little bit much for some of the younger viewers, or guys, with their kids, but that's just a family, albeit it's just the two of them, just fishing together, having a good time, having fun. And
Mhm.
it's not about Doug Wagner, the guide. And I think it was refreshing to watch for me. And when I see some of these other guys, like Sam Gaza, come up to Eagle last year, fishing in the memory of his grandfather, and he put together a really cool 2 video shoot it was super compelling to watch, because he had a story behind it. And I think guys like Jay Siemens are leading the charge with that style of video. My buddy Kyle Fregis, he puts out videos where it's the story through 6 or 7 videos. It's more than just a quick hit, one video and you're done. So I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff coming out. What do you think of the industry today versus, when you guys were doing it in the 2009, 2010, 2012s?
Well, I definitely think it's going in the right direction. Like the stuff you're talking about, obviously, you and I have talked, like you said, about the family thing. And I mean, I think that's the way it should be going. The personal aspect, the people aspect is really, that's where the real substance comes from. That's where there's real depth there. Like, how many muskies, how many pike, whatever do you need to see? Like, we've all seen a million videos. Getting to know people and learning their story and sharing their story. Like you're talking about Sam's videos there. I watch those. I watch all of Kyle's videos. I think those guys do an excellent job. But for me, like, that's another reason why I think you're growing on your channel. And what I really enjoy is these interviews, talking to all these people. It's the personal aspect that, getting to know people. That to me is really what it's all about, right? If you want the community to grow and thrive, you've got to support each other and get to know each other. Like,
Yeah,
that's what it's all about to me.
I couldn't agree more. And when we started filming, we had no idea. We're just flying by the seat of our pants. I mean, like, let's face it, like, nobody really had an idea. Even a guy like Brian Scaife, if he's still watching, he's probably just shaking his head. Yep. He's like, I had no idea. We just put cameras up and we're going to film and hope that it works. And you guys were probably the same, right? Like you and Mike, probably we'll see what we get and we'll do something.
Trial and error.
We'll do something with it. That's the fun part. When you start to overanalyze before you start fishing, and the filming becomes more work than fun. And that's happened to us where we're like, oh, I got to get this shot. I got to try to get this. I got to get the drone up. Then all of a sudden it just, Dave and I aren't having fun anymore. Like it's just not what we want to do. So there's like a balance point in there where it has to work. And I look at like Jay Siemens, he's so much production value, and he's got, ideas. He come out here ice fishing. I'm pulling into Bobby's. I got to have the drone shot. I got to have the shot of me pulling away. I respect all that, but for me, I can't do that. I don't have time for that, and I don't have the the technical knowledge to pull all that off. So I think there's both sides of that. But what I like about a lot of the newer content is that down to earth. And I see my buddy Adam's like, oh, that's what makes 54 refreshing, is the down to earth content. I want it to be the community. I never wanted 54 of us to be about me. Yeah, I'm the figurehead. I'm the one that does all the talking, but it's a bigger group of people that we share common goals and common values and interests. And I think that's why you and I hit it off a lot just with our talking, is like, again, we just a similar set of values. And I appreciated so much what you guys did early on, that it really stuck with me. And I asked Mike, how did you guys get this shot, or how did you guys get that shot, or what were you doing? And I've asked you the same things. And it's to me, again, as a history buff, I love that stuff. I just want to show the viewers one thing here. Mike give me this old camera that he's got on an old visor. It's a early HD camera, and I don't know what year this come out. Mike just give it to me, but I know it's part of the history of Giant Quest. It's something I'll just put on the wall in the garage. And I just, again, going back to, you guys were pushing even for the time. Like today, it's so easy for people to just go out, buy a GoPro, throw a head cam on, and get maybe the most amazing footage of the year. Like guys like John and Ashley Holmstrom last year with that absolutely giant fish. And I'm pretty sure that's a head cam fish coming in on Lac Sewell. They have high production value on their videos, and the video that goes viral is just a head cam of a fish following a bait, not eating. So anybody can do that, and that's not taking anything away from that, because that footage is freaking amazing. I've watched that. I probably got 100 views on that thing. I mean, we all have. So there's so much you can do in today's world, but it's taking it to not really another level, but it's putting your own personality, your own take, drawing from your inspirations. And for us, we've been open and honest about where we're drawing inspirations from, and I think people do respect that to some level. What, as we kind of wrap this up, Heinrich, where do you see the industry going in the future? What would you like to see in it? And I know you and I've talked, you'd love to move back up, our way and come and fish back up here. But, what do you see? You said it looks good. What do you see in the future?
Well, it's a tough question, to be honest, but that's a tough one. There's a big factor that we haven't even talked about that I really have no knowledge or practice with. It's kind of changing the whole game right now, right? If we want to bring up forward facing sonar, so that's going to affect where the industry goes and what happens too. Yeah, I don't know what to say. I mean, the filming aspect of it looks good. I mean, people are getting better and better at filming, and people seem to be more and more supportive of each other, and less competitive in that way of like everybody wants everybody to succeed. So I mean, that's good. So I think that it's trending that way is a good trend, but I'm not really sure where else to take that.
I'll just say, on the YouTube side or the content creation side, I do think you're right. I think a lot of us want to see everybody succeed because there's no point fighting over the same space. There's space for everybody. And because our industry and our niche is so small, I think we have to get along and support one another. But I do think that there's there is going to be a big change, obviously, with forward facing sonar. That's beyond the scope of today's talk.
For sure.
I did see the PMTT banned it for tournament hours, which, you know, people look at that and think, oh, they're banning it outright. Well, it's not. A tournament can do whatever a tournament wants. But I do think, and I already see there's a change in just the way people are using it, thinking about it. You're always going to have your bad apples that are going to, go snipe fish, whatever. But I already see a mindset shift in the way people are using it. And even with the filming, I see a shift away from having to show backgrounds or people complaining about backgrounds. It just there's so much on social media that you can't be upset if Brian Scaife comes to Eagle and I can see Swanson's Island in the background because the next person posts the same fish from a different angle and it's the same thing. So there has to be some give and take, right? And I think that's it is getting better with all of that. I want to ask one kind of wrap up question here. What was one of the really cool memories that you and Mike or you had with Mike in Giant Quest? And follow that up with if Giant Quest was going today, where would you guys be fishing?
Well, really, almost anywhere. I mean, I've always dreamed of there's a lot of places. I mean, muskies are near and dear to my heart, but I like all fish, right? I mean, my background is I'm a fisheries biologist. I also have a diploma as an aquaculture technician. I'm just I have a fish brain, right? So to quote Dick Pearson, muskies are thinking man's fish. So that's kind of how I ended up really getting in love with muskies. So, it's just that the challenge, the chase, that's where the whole name Giant Quest comes in too, like to kind of bring all that together. We're talking about the people aspect, but it's the story too, right? People are getting better and better with their videos of kind of like bringing their whole little story together, a whole little quest of the whole trip to get somewhere and everything it entails to catch your fish. But specific memory would be actually, I want to say the day I met Mike, where I was guiding at Totem Lodge, and there's an offsite staff property just outside of Soon Arrows there, and we were both housed in cabins there. And I think I'm about 7 years older than Mike. When I first showed up there, I was about 29 years old, so that put him at like 21, 22 years old, something like that. And everybody was buzzing about the guy before I even met him. Like, well, who is this kid? Like, you're like telling me he's the greatest guide ever, and he's like 22 years old or whatever. I'm like, well, I just got to meet this kid. And he rolled in like a rock star. Everybody was all over him. He had a cool little Dodge Dakota RT at the time, and then he had I can't remember if he had the Mr. Pike already or not, but I feel like he might have had his Mr. Pike Lund. And within minutes of him starting to unpack, I was helping the guy unpack and in his cabin, and out rolls a stack of pictures like this big. I'm like, oh my God, this kid has to be my best friend. Like there were so many big fish pictures in there. It, we just hit it off. We hit the ground running then, and just kind of hinge off of that. It wasn't long after that I was like, hey Mike, look at this brand new In Fisherman magazine. There's this guy, Don Schwartz, and he's got this big Darla kind of crazy looking single bladed big bucktail. I can't remember if it was a 10 or a 12 blade on there. I would say it was a 12 or a 13, even a single blade with a big twister tail on it. And I was like, and he's fishing like our part of Lake of the Woods. Like everyone talks about Lake of the Woods. We were in Soon Arrows, that's Whitefish Bay. That's like the west arm of Eagle Lake. It's the toughest part of the lake by far. Super clear, super deep. Anyways, this guy's like, catching 50 plus inches at a Whitefish Bay. I was like, we gotta meet this guy. And Mike's like, well, actually, I know Don Schwartz, and he's got a cabin right next door. And I'm like, are you serious? we drove over there, and he happened to be at his cabin, and the rest is history there too. Like Don to this day is one of my very, very best friends, and he got us started in filming. We were kind of like little lackeys for him, holding the big, back then it was the, I don't know what you call that, Super 8 or whatever, the little tapes, right? The little tapes that went in the camera, big camera on your shoulder, and we helped him get some footage for Musky Intervention, right? And his DVD before that was Musky's Live. So if anyone's never seen those DVDs, they're probably hard to track down, but like Don was the underwater footage king for sure. Like Musky's Live and then Musky Intervention, and that's where we got inspired to do basically a lot of how we were filming too, right? We just didn't have a cameraman, so we invented our own little kind of stick cameraman for the boat.
Oh, that's so cool. I got a couple good memories with Mike too, and I'll just bring up one. Mike and I fished eagles quite a few years ago in the Mr. Pike. We put in at the Mason Park at like 5:30 a.m. We were going to do a marathon day, and first spot, East Three Sisters. Mike got a low 40s, like sun's just coming up. Like it's one of these pictures everybody comes to Eagle for. And then we grinded all freaking day. I got a big pike, which was probably one of my bigger pike at the time, down in like the bottom end of El Dorado somewhere. We seen a couple big fish. Mike lost a nice one on a tube. And then we were going to go in and have a couple beers, have lunch at Temple Bay. And we were within sight of Temple Bay. And Mike pulled off like a textbook figure 8 master class right in front of me on a Dadson, like it was a laser or something, and got a 4-footer, just like absolutely clear, beautiful Eagle Lake fish. We went in, had a couple drinks, and then actually I think his now wife and my wife came out and we fished the evening. But just for anybody that ever gets a chance to fish with somebody like Mike Grant on a Lake Eagle, do it. You'll learn so much in such a short period of time, and that's any guide really. But yeah, Mike's somebody that's near and dear to my heart. I just like him as a human being, and I love him as an angler. I do want to put this up on the screen, Heinrich, our buddy Adams, nice Winchester in the background. What is your nationality?
It's I was born in Canada, but a lot of my family is German, and I was the firstborn, so I was named after my grandfather. That's his name. So that's actually my father's name too. I'm Heinrich III for everybody.
That's awesome.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
When you brought up your schooling and your trade, and you said you were a fisheries biologist, did I get that right?
Yeah, I went to University of Guelph and got a degree in biology with honors in marine and freshwater biology. So I've always been a fish brain.
That is interesting, and that's something that I don't think that you and I talked about off air, but that's something I want to poke away at a little bit more, because that again, that kind of stuff is interesting to me. But I totally appreciate you coming on, and by the looks of all the names on here, there's a lot of guys that are going to be reaching back out to you now that you've kind of broke radio silence. And I think your story is super interesting. The story of Giant Quest is super interesting. And when I post this as a video, I will put a link to the Giant Quest videos, because guys that are watching, go back and see where a lot of modern day GoPro style, even though you guys weren't using a GoPro early on, but that's where this style of footage came from. You guys really, blazed a path that a lot of us, we really owe you guys a lot of gratitude. So I just want to say thank you from a lot of the YouTubers that followed. I can guarantee there's a lot of us out there that, we are inspired by what you guys did.
I appreciate that, Glenn, and thanks a lot for giving me the chance to come on and have a chat.
Oh, I appreciate it. And like I've said with some of the guests that I've had on recently from Musky Hunter magazine, when the history of musky hunting and musky fishing is told years from now, and we talk about where self-filming or YouTube style filming started, guys are going to go back, and Giants Quest is going to be one of those things that is mentioned. And I think that's going to outlive you guys. And I just think you guys did something really, really cool. So I just want to thank you for that. And I am going to push Mike Grant to try and come on because I think he's got a wealth of knowledge. That one might be a little bit tougher. But again, everybody, Heinrich Bier, and anybody that's looking for an easy cam post, reach out to him on Facebook. I'm sure he can get you one, and look for us to do something together here in the next month, month and a half. We're going to run a really cool contest, and we're going to try and get some of that stuff into the hands of a couple newer anglers that want to film, because I want to support it. Heinrich wants to support it. And I think that's something really cool that we can do together.
Right on.
All right, guys, this has been another absolutely amazing check it off the bucket list style interview for me. One of the guys that I certainly looked up to early on for the filming, for the fishing. We'll be back in a couple weeks. I'm not sure who I got lined up next, but this one will be a fun one to look back on. So for myself and for Heinrich, this has been 54 minutes with insert name of legend here, Heinrich Bier. We'll see you guys later.